Hey everyone, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Okay, you guys, let's get going. It's Friday, it's time for some tea, and we need to talk about the Duggars. Yesterday, I talked about Josiah Duggar and Lauren Duggar's arranged marriage and how that might implode, and really why Jim Bob had put this marriage together because Josiah had been very a wild child, not listening to him, and it was a way for him to tame his wild ways. Now, we know a lot of the time that Jim Bob has sort of arranged marriages. In fact, he was allegedly arranged the marriage with Josh and Anna after everything happened with Josh and his sisters as a way to sort of tame and control Josh's behavior, which ultimately did not work because we know what happened in 2015 when he was caught on Ashley Madison. We also know that he may or may not have set up Joseph and Kendra because of Joseph's sometimes outlandish behavior as well, and Josiah seems to fall into place as well. Now, he was also in a hurry to apparently get the girls married off, particularly the ones that were a part of the specific issues related to Josh. And with these girls, they had some choice, but not a lot of choice about who they married. Now, some of them went completely outside of their dad and did things their own way, and that would be Jinger. Now, a lot of people growing up watching the show, watching Counting On, watching 19 Kids and Counting, always said that Jinger was the rebel Duggar. Now, in a way, she's been a rebel because she hasn't done things exactly the same way as her parents. She's always been a little bit more out there. She's always been a little bit more fashion forward. She's always been a little bit more interested in the modern world. And there was even a forum at one point started called Free Jinger because people believed that she was being stifled by her parents. Now, a lot of people assumed that Jill would actually follow in the footsteps of her parents because she had been for the longest time sort of considered like the favorite daughter, the one that did everything that Jim Bob and Michelle wanted. But ultimately, Jill was the one that turned into being a rebel because she left the IBLP. She married Derek, who actually Jim Bob set her up with. And even though he set her up with Derek, they have completely cut ties. They're not connected to the IBLP. They're enrolling their kids in public school. Their husband, Derek, is in law school, and Jill is actually in therapy to deal with some of the issues that she had from growing up with these two parents. Now, Jinger did things her own way. So here's how it all plays out. This is Jinger on her wedding day. Now, apparently, according to a source that spoke to the Hollywood Gossip, who's been dishing all kinds of delicious tea. And here's the thing. Some of this information is stuff that I've also heard from insiders connected to the family. So I can sort of corroborate a little bit of this because it's what I'm hearing too. So here's the deal. Jinger and Jeremy met through Ben Seawald. Ben Seawald obviously is Jessa's husband. And Jessa and Ben were married, and then Ben meets Jeremy. Jeremy is interested in Jinger, and they connect and they meet and they fall in love. Now, Jim Bob literally had very little to do with this union, and he had very little to do with their connection, their courting, any of that. He, in fact, didn't arrange it. It was like Jinger and them, they met, they wanted to court, and then, oh, here it is. Now, one of the things right off the bat that was an issue for Jim Bob is that they have very big theological differences. And I'm going to keep this very high level so that you guys don't get overwhelmed by it. But Jim Bob and Michelle are what you would consider evangelical, like legalists. And they believe in the complete obedience to God. And by doing good works, they can go to heaven. And by simply believing and doing what God tells and following the law and putting the work before the Lord instead of the relationship with God above everything else, these guys believe by following rules, sticking to the rules, and doing the rules, they will be able to go to heaven. Now, Jeremy is what is called a Calvinist, and these people believe in the predestination made by God, who has predestined individuals to go to heaven, and because of that, there's nothing that you can do or say that will get you to heaven, but if you follow a pretty moralistic life, it's kind of an indication that God has predestined you for it. It's a major theological difference that can get a lot of people sort of heated because Calvinists believe there's predestination. Legalists and other non-legalist Christians believe in salvation by just, doing good works, believing in God, and Jesus came to free us, okay? So apparently Jeremy and Ben are both Calvinists, and this is completely not okay with Jim Bob, but he found out about it. He found out about Ben's beliefs after they got married, and when he knew about Jeremy's, he wasn't thrilled, but there was really nothing that they could do at this point. So here's how it all happens. They end up getting married, and he was never really a big fan of Jeremy's. He accepted their relationship, according to the source, because like Jinger seemed very adamant to be with him. And he's a little bit less conservative than the rest of the guys that he has set up with his daughters. But I would still say, like, as a reformist, that's what Calvinists are considered. They're still pretty conservative, although Jeremy prefers to live a more modern life. He doesn't care about, like, if girls wear pants or women wear pants or have short hair, or, they can sort of take advantage of those worldly things that are in the world because of that predestination. But they're still relatively conservative, and Jeremy still has very conservative beliefs about marriage, about a lot of different things. So basically, the belief problem was one issue, but then there's this other issue about they moved. So they have theological differences. Jeremy sees women as not having this very, place in the world where they have to obey their husbands. He's a lot more open to Jinger having a voice and a choice. He's not a legalist. He's not, saying you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do this, you have to do that. So he doesn't necessarily ascribe to what Jim Bob ascribes to, but he has to, Jim Bob and he sort of found a middle for the sake of Jinger. Well, that changed because as soon as they got married, he takes a job and they moved to Laredo, Texas. And it was when they moved to Laredo, Texas, it became an issue because the whole courting process for the two of them was very, very, very quick. And they moved to Texas, and he completely finds out that I've lost control. And at one point, before they even move, he confronts Jeremy about his beliefs, and Jeremy says, yes, I'm a Calvinist. And Jim Bob gets upset, according to this source. But it wasn't his theological difference that was the big issue. It was the fact that they were going to move, because then Jeremy takes Jinger out of the way. Jim Bob can no longer control the purse strings. He can no longer control her thoughts, her feelings. She's going to have exposure to the real world. She's going to be able to see things, because in Arkansas, they can control, their social media. They even admitted they control their adult children's social media by putting on monitoring it through covenant eyes. We know that they control the amount of money they receive. They dole out gifts instead of giving them an income. There's a lot of ways that Jim Bob and Michelle have controlled the kids and minimized their reduction to the real world. And Jinger just went full swing into Laredo and became a modern girl. So apparently everything deteriorates when they actually go to Texas, but it gets worse when they decide to move to Los Angeles. So he was working as a pastor in Laredo, and then eventually he gets an opportunity to go to seminary for the same church in Los Angeles. And so they move out to California so that he can go to seminary school. And apparently at this point in time, Jim Bob actually disowns them, and he completely cuts them off. And he cuts them off because he thinks now that by moving to California, Jinger and Jeremy has basically stolen Jinger and taken her to the land of heathens. This is what the source says. Now, we know that in California, and a lot of these fundies are very, very, very freaked out by California because of the progressive lifestyles, the openness, the acceptance of all different forms of life. People are not all Christians. People have different viewpoints. People have all different religions. Some people have no religion. There's also an openness and acceptance of, the LGBTQ+, which is very much not in line or what these two agree with, okay? So they apparently disown Jinger, and then it gets to a point where people inside their sort of circle in Arkansas tell them that listen, this isn't a good look for you. If you are going to disown Jinger for moving to California and for being with Jeremy because he's a Calvinist, you're going to lose Jinger forever. And it wasn't because he wanted Jinger back. It was more, according to the source, the perception that if he didn't reunite with her, that it wouldn't be a good look for the family's image. So the source says, then all of a sudden something was said to somebody in the community, and to this day, I still don't know who it is. They told Jim Bob, if you really want to stand in a bad light, you can just carry on the way that you're carrying on with Jinger. They say that Jim Bob actually objected to the, argument by this person saying that he's a Calvinist and he stole my daughter. But ultimately, they say you're going to lose Ginger. And apparently, they go back to California at this point and they make amends with her. So Ginger ultimately ends up coming out of this conflict between her parents as the victor because she's no longer disowned by her family. She's been welcomed back by the family and they're accepted to a point. And the source actually made a point to say this, and I actually concur with this, and I would agree with this, is that Jeremy and Ginger aren't doing anything wrong. They're not out in California doing bad things. What is she doing that's out there that is so wrong for them to actually be disowned? What? She cut her hair. She dyed it blonde. She wears shorts. She wears pants. It's those are normal things that you and I would do in the real world. And so basically all Ginger is in the real world, and Jim Bob couldn't handle the fact that she was in the real world. Now Jill is disowned, for similar reasons, but it's funny because she's in Arkansas still. She's in the real world, but somehow it's funny because Ginger has always sort of respected her parents in a way that I would say, Jill, when she sees her parents now, she doesn't even pretend to try to conform. When she went out to dinner with her, or went out to lunch and spent the day with her sisters, Jill had her jeans on with the holes in the knees, and she was looking just like a girl that's modern. Jill doesn't wear as much makeup. She doesn't dye her hair. She still keeps her hair relatively long, though she did cut off 12 or 14 inches recently. But Ginger is by far a little bit more, I would say, progressive in how she's sort of moderned up her entire look and gotten more into fashion. So, but here's the good news. Now, some people, and I will say I have been critical of Jeremy because Jeremy can come off as a bit arrogant and a little bit controlling. But the fact of the matter is that it's a good thing that Jeremy doesn't hold some of the beliefs that Jim Bob does, because one of the things that's most problematic about the IBLP is this belief that women have to be completely obedient to men. And that means they are joyfully available to a woman no matter what. Meaning, if a man wants his wife to do something in the bedroom, she has to do it regardless of how she feels. In fact, it's a basic teaching by Bill Gothard that women must submit and have to give it to their husband whenever their husband wants it, unless they have their time of the month. But even if they're leading up to their time of the month, crampy, bloated, they still have to do it. And even when it is their time of the month, they still have to find ways to give their husbands pleasure in other ways. And if they're sick. So a woman has to fully obey and fully submit to be joyfully available. Something that Miss Michelle said that she gave her daughters advice about. And that's not a good belief, because they don't believe that there's anything such as consent in a marriage, and that it's a man's right to have a woman no matter what. No holds barred. And that is not held in the belief of Jeremy. And so she has stepped away from this belief that a woman has a right to have her own autonomy, to have her own body, to, take care of her choice, to make the choice to say, I'm not going to do this with you. I don't have to do this with you. And that could also be another reason why they haven't had another child yet. There's still a ton of rumors that Ginger's pregnant. And listen, I don't know. I hate to speculate, and I didn't speculate on it when people were saying the same thing about Joy until it was apparent that she was showing. But because of her loss, I just hadn't gone there. Now with Ginger, I still haven't seen that she's pregnant. Obviously, everyone wants her to have another baby, but I don't expect Ginger and Jeremy to have as many children as her parents. In fact, Jeremy just doesn't come from as big of a family. He has a couple siblings, but not like Jim, Bob, and Michelle. Same thing with Derek and Jill. I could see Derek and Jill having maybe one more kid, but that's it. If you can expect anyone to have a zillion children, I would say Kendra and Jessa would be the ones at this point I would see having a lot of kids. I wouldn't even see Abby and David having a lot of kids, because Abby works as a nurse and she's almost 30. She's 30 years old. So I think some of these kids are going to do things a little bit differently and not follow that suit, meaning they do practice birth control, which is not a bad thing. It puts the control back in the woman of when I'm going to have the baby, what I'm going to do. And if you don't have to be joyfully available all the time and you don't have to do these things, you're not going to get pregnant as much, as fast. So they grew up in a cult-like environment. Everyone I've talked to that comes out of this world says it's a cult. We know that Bill Gothard is not a good person. We know that Bill Gothard has a very shady track record. We also know that Jim Bob and Michelle have outspokenly committed to extreme control of their children. So Ginger is a rebel. She got out. She's in modern world, but she's also with a reformist. So she's still in a marriage that's relatively conservative. So there's still that aspect, but we should be happy in the respect that she did things her own way. She didn't get dad didn't arrange the courting. Dad didn't arrange the marriage. She married who she wanted to marry, whether you like him or not. And she's living where she wants to live, doing what she wants to do. So to that, I say go Ginger, keep going. Hopefully your beliefs and your views towards communities like the LGBTQ plus will evolve, because right now some people in that world do not appreciate the beliefs and the things that your husband says. With that being said, what are your thoughts? Is it weird to you that it was a theological debate that ultimately was a sticking point for them, but it was the reason that they moved to California? The fact that like Jim Bob would disown them. And what do you think about the damage control done? Like, will Jim Bob do nothing for damage control? And if that's being said, why won't he reconcile with Jill for damage control? I think in the case of Jim Bob, with Jill and Derek, the difference is that Jill doesn't want to reconcile. Like, I don't think Jill wants to go there. I think Jill wants the boundaries. I don't think Jill wants to have that set of control. With Ginger, I don't know. Maybe she is okay with the fact that her parents are still involved and she's still getting money and that kind of thing. But either way, whether you're team Ginger, team Jill, or team all the kids getting away from these parents, 2 of the girls have essentially broken free. So be grateful for that. And we can probably expect to see more, because with 19 kids, you have to know that not all of them are going to follow the path of their parents. So tell me what your thoughts are in the comments below, and I will be back later. Bye, guys.